إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. This phone is not cooperating with me today. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We've been discussing the connection and relationship between fasting and having taqwa. How is it that us staying away from food, drink, and all the other things which are haram for us and break our fast, how does staying away from all of that get us closer to God and make us more aware of His presence? Last night we said one of the ways that this happens is fasting can help us restructure the way that we think about reality. It can make you rethink your outlook, your worldview, and the way that your mind currently works. So we gave some examples. We said we typically think that the weakness, the tiredness, the issues that we have are because of physical issues, right? When you feel physically tired or physically weak, you think you need a physical solution of food and drink. We said our reality is a spiritual reality. The real us, the real you, the real me is a soul, it's a spirit. We exist as immaterial spiritual beings first, and our body is an extension of that. So when we have spiritual strength and energy, that fuels the body, not the other way around. The next thing we talked about was about this idea of feeling the fast, right? You have individuals who, they say, we feel the fast, we feel hungry, we feel tired, we feel thirsty. What do we do about that? So first we said that, again, one of the benefits of fasting is it helps us undo the brainwashing that, for lack of a better word, that our brain has had throughout the years as we've grown up. So we said one of the problems is we think that we're hungry. We think that we need a certain amount of food to feel full and satisfied, and that we have this big plate in front of us that we see at iftar time. You fill up your plate and you eat all of this food and you think that that's what you need. And we said that this is actually a trick. Your brain has been tricked and you don't need this much food. Even though you've been fasting for 18 hours, you don't need to double, triple the amount that you're eating and drinking. And we offered some solutions of how you can readjust your eating and nutritional habits so that you can now, be healthier, maybe lose some weight, whatever it happens to be. But at the end of the day, the main point was that you're restructuring the way that your brain thinks. And this is one of the ways that gets us towards getting closer to God. So we gave two tips. We said one is that as you're making your plate, add some filler ingredients, like vegetables and other things, to make it look like there's more food there, and to trick your eye into thinking that there's more by adding some volume. So you cut down your portion, but you make it look like it's a full plate in front of you. Then the last thing we said is, okay, so some people will still feel hungry in the day. They'll still feel thirsty and tired. Well, how do you solve that? And the spiritual answer we gave is that you're supposed to. Fasting and hunger and thirst and tiredness go hand in hand. One of the main points and wisdoms behind fasting is for you to feel something. You're supposed to feel the fast. If you're not feeling it, then there might be an issue. There may be a problem. So we said there's three reasons. One of them is that it helps us empathize with those who are less fortunate, right? Those who, their lives in Ramadan and out of Ramadan are really no different. They don't get much to eat or drink. They're fasting year-round because they can't afford to eat. The second way that this helps us is it gets us to a state of self-control. We learn to start controlling our animalistic and physical desires. Even if it's something as simple as not eating or drinking or smoking for a few hours, that still gives us a bit of self-control. And the third was it helps a person realign with their self and become more aware of their true self. Or in other words, self-awareness. Now these two last points are very, very crucial. Self-control and self-awareness. There's an idea that sits under both of these, of self-control and self-awareness, and that's what we want to talk about tonight. When you hear this idea of self-control, self-awareness, self-esteem, self-confidence, self-image, all these different terms that they talk about in psychology, right, or in spirituality, there's that first part, that prefix, that self that we have to talk about. What is the self? Who am I? Who are you? What are we exactly deep down? Once we discuss this a little bit, then we can move on and talk about self-control and self-awareness. If we want to put this another way, we want to say, what is our true identity? What are we really? What are we in reality? And this will relate to the question that somebody had asked 2 nights ago, which I alluded to last night as well. When we're hearing these statistics that 60% of American Muslims, maybe throughout the world it's the same amount of Muslims, are not praying. They're not interested in religion anymore. Why is that the case? So this will help us understand that, inshallah. If you could send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So hopefully by the end of today's discussion, we'll have a general idea of why is it that so many Muslims, even in our own communities, are abandoning the religion, they're becoming irreligious, they're not practicing, and maybe they become atheists or something like this, yeah? So we have to stop and ask, if somebody were to ask you, what are you? Who are you? What do you identify yourself as? How would you reply to them? What kind of answer would you give them? Right? Anybody randomly, let's say, in the masjid, they come to you, you've never met them before, and they just say, Assalamu alaikum, what are you? Or who are you? Okay, besides your name, that's obviously one way of identifying yourself. They say, okay, well, what are you? How would you respond? Typically, most people would probably do one of 2 things. One would be their ethnicity, right? They might say, oh, I'm a Khoja, I'm Indian, I'm Pakistani, I'm Iranian, I'm Iraqi, etc. Right? Another way might be by their profession, the way that they live their life. Well, what are you? Oh, I'm a doctor, I'm a dentist, I'm a business owner, whatever it happens to be. Yeah? These are probably the 2 most popular ways people identify themselves. Now, we have to understand the way that we answer this question is actually telling us a little bit more about ourselves. How so? The way that we answer this question is actually telling us, what do we feel is important to us? What do we feel is important to others? And what do we feel are important things in society in general? What does this society give importance to? If it's ethnic background, if they want to know, okay, what are you? They want to know where I'm from. They want to know my ethnic background, my country of origin. Okay, that's how I'll answer. Or, since people have become very, very materialistic in this day and age, well, I have to tell them about my job, my position. That's how I have to identify myself. If I give them, some other job title, which, let's say, some people think it's beneath them, they might be hesitant to answer, right? I don't want to give examples because I don't want anybody to feel bad here. But think about it for yourself. If somebody were to say a specific kind of job, do you automatically have this gut reaction and think, oh, this person's not doing very well, or maybe they're not very educated? The way people answer this, we automatically make these snap judgments, don't we? If somebody says they're from X country, oh, these kind of people, they show up late. Or these kind of people, they're not very practicing. Or these kind of people, they're dirty, We have these, unfortunately, these judgments, these prejudicial understandings. This is the way that we react, unfortunately. Now, this is if somebody else is asking you. So now I want to turn it around. Imagine you ask yourself, what am I? Who am I? How would you answer yourself this question? If you say ethnicity or you say job, then I think there might be something wrong with you. This is not a normal way of thinking and talking to yourself, right? If you want to know deep down what is your true essence, how are you going to respond to yourself? Now, some might say, well, deep down, I know what I am. I'm a Muslim. I'm a mu'min. I'm a lover of Ahlul-bayt, for example, right? My hypothesis, my thesis, my argument for tonight is that if you answer to yourself anything else but that I'm a Muslim, or I'm a mu'min, or I'm a Shia, etc., then I think that we have a big problem with our identities. And this is what I want to cover tonight. You see, besides that, some of us may not answer the question like this. Some of us might answer. You might say, well, I am a Muslim, I am a mu'min. Okay. Then you take the next step forward, you ask the next question. Okay, so I said I identify myself as a Muslim, I identify myself as a Shia, a lover of Ahlul-bayt, whatever. Okay, does what I do, is the way that I represent myself in conformity and in line with the way I just identified myself? Take it back to this statistic. If there's a certain idea of what a Muslim or a mu'min should be, offering prayers, fasting in the month of Ramadan, observing hijab, going for Hajj when they're supposed to go on Hajj, having a certain minimum level of akhlaq, coming to the masjid, whatever it is. Does that line up? You say you're a Muslim, do your actions line up to this? Let me give an example. Let's say you meet somebody, right? You ask them about them, what are you? And let's say they identify themselves as a vegan, right? Oh, I'm a vegan, right? And then, right after this, you go out to eat with them, and what do they order? They order a steak. They're like, okay, what kind of vegan is this? Immediately you're going to go in your mind and say, this is not a real vegan, right? He's just playing games. Like, what kind of vegan does that? And maybe he answers, well, I'm not a religious vegan, I'm a spiritual vegan, but that's a whole other argument. So you would have a weird reaction to them, right? You say, listen, you're claiming to be a person that doesn't eat meat. Like, a vegan is somebody who shouldn't be eating meat, along with other things. But I'm seeing you going against that. Why do you claim your identity is Muslim when you're going against that? Just like that meat-eating vegan, what are we? Are we actually Muslims or mu'mins? Are our actions in conformity with the way that we identify ourselves? This is the crux of the problem. Especially in this society, in this part of the world, we Muslims are facing a huge identity crisis. We're claiming and thinking one thing, but the way we're acting is something else. So now how do we reconcile these ideas and how do we move forward? First, let me bring in a verse of Quran which will kind of give us the blueprint and format that Allah is showing us that this is what's going to happen. In Surah Al-Hashr, chapter 59, verse 19, he says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. This verse is really, really beautiful. Beautiful in the sense it's a beautiful verse, but it's terrible because it might apply to us. It's the problem. So what happens here? وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهِ. Don't be like those who have done nisyan and forgotten about God, who have forgotten about Allah. Okay, fine. Then Allah says, okay, if this happens, He's giving a cause. If you forget about Allah, what's the result? فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. If you forget about God, what's going to happen? Allah's going to do, أَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. I'm going to make you forget your nafs. If you want to put it in terms, I'm going to make you forget your identity. I'm going to make you forget who you really are. And then, what's the end result? You forgot about God. God then said, okay, you forget about me, then I'll make you forget who you really are. Then now, what's the end result? What's the conclusion? What's the consequences? أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. These people end up becoming fasiq, open sinners. The ones who will claim one thing and end up sinning within the same breath. They'll say, yes, I'm a Muslim, but I won't practice X, Y, Z. I claim I'm a Muslim, but then 60% of those individuals won't go and pray. This is what we're facing right now. This verse is explaining this identity crisis that we're facing in this society. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And this is not just in America or Canada or even in Europe. This is something, those of you who have traveled, we live in Iran, right? So I'm seeing this even among Iranians, unfortunately. There's an identity crisis there too, because other cultures and other ideas are penetrating into their minds. And now they're moving in a different direction. It's a very, very sad state of affairs for the Muslim world and our ummah. So now, okay. Now we say, listen, I hope and I pray and I think I want to call myself a Muslim at the very least. Or, inshallah, maybe we can be mu'mineen. But I know my actions are not in conformity. I know I'm having an identity crisis. I claim to be believing in God, believing in the prophets, believing in the Ahlul-bayt, believing in the Day of Judgment, and all that stuff, that whole Islamic package, but I don't buy and I don't practice any of the stuff that goes along with it. Okay, so how did that happen? Where did this identity crisis come from? How did I forget about God? I'm thinking about Him right now. I'm not forgetting about Him, right? This is the second question that's going to come to our mind. We need to figure out where this identity crisis came from. How did this identity loss happen in the first place? So I have two analogies set up. One is probably for those who are a bit more youthful, I guess is probably a good word to use. And if you guys don't get it, then I have another one for you. So those who may have attended our lectures at IEC this past Muharram, I shared this analogy there too. I'll share it again, inshallah. If you don't understand it, I can give you another analogy later, but because of lack of time, I'm going to stick to just one. So how many of you are familiar with the character Superman from the DC universe? Right? I was asking you to raise your hands, but nobody did. Okay, that's fine. You don't have to raise your hands. We'll do a poll about that later. I don't know. Okay, so there's a character Superman, right? Comic book character in the DC universe. Yeah? So who is Superman in reality? Who is he really? Right? You might say he's Clark Kent, but that's not who he really is. He's actually Kal-El, right? He's an alien. I can't go into the deep tafsir and the tariq, obviously, but I have to give you some information. So as a baby, he was sent by his parents on his home planet to Earth. He was raised by Earth parents here, and he grew up, and then something, something, something. Then he became Superman in movies, comic books, blah, 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 whatever. So when Clark was a teenager, right? When he first realized that he had these powers, right? Super strength, he could shoot lasers out of his eyes, super speed, flight, all that stuff. What initially happened is that he got scared, right? He freaked out. He didn't immediately find out that he could, like fly halfway across the world or, lift up a car and say, okay, now I want to be a hero and I want to save the world. That's not the first thought he had. He feared it and said, I don't want to be like this. I don't want these powers. I want to be like everybody else. Now, how did this happen to him? Well, think about it. He was raised by Earth parents. He had no idea about his real identity, where he really came from, what he was really sent down to Earth for. And all his friends, everybody around him, they were obviously normal Earthlings who were just living their daily lives, right? They weren't running around being heroes, so why would he want to do that? Nobody likes to be the odd person out, and this is what he faced. Later on, he comes to terms with this identity, and he gets back to this and becomes Superman. So this was a short and little tafsir of Superman and his history and this and that, right? Okay. Now, what does this have to do with our discussion? He has his original identity. What happens? He loses it. Why does he lose that? Number one, his upbringing, the way he's raised. Now let me bring you a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. It's a famous hadith that you've probably heard before. It's مَا مِن مَوْلُودٍ إِلَّا يُولَدْ عَلَى فِطْرَةٍ فَأَبَوَاهُ يَهُودَانِ وَيَنْصَرَانِ. Every single child, every single offspring, every person that's born is born on the fitrah. They're born on this divine connected nature to God. If you want to put it in our terms, everybody's born a Muslim. Every single person that's born is born a Muslim. And what does the Prophet say? He says it's the parents that either make them Christians or Jews. And then we can take the next step forward. What happens is they can make them any other religion, they can make them an atheist, they can make him a non-practicing Muslim, etc. In the same way that Clark's parents, Superman's parents, raised him as an earthling, didn't tell him that he has to go save the world. The same way, many times, the main issue is not social media, it's not movies, it's not music, it's not this. The main issue that we're having, the reason our youth specifically don't have a strong Muslim identity is, I'm sorry to say, it's upbringing, it's the parenting. Now, many of us might think that we're parenting our kids according to the teachings of the Ahlul-bayt. But I'm telling you, I've been to many centers and I've talked to many parents. I've seen them in action. And this is not the parenting of the Ahlul-bayt. This is not what Imam Ali alayhi salam taught us. The things that we do, I've seen they take from outdated Western psychology. Right? And I can't go into details now. But Islamic parenting is probably one of the most fundamental, the most important issues right now. If you don't want to lose your child, then you need to raise them as a Muslim. Yes, there are things out there that are misguiding children. Of course, I don't deny that social media and TV and music and movies, they have an effect. I'm not going to deny that, and we'll get into that as well. But if your child has a strong base before they leave their house, then they can take on anything. But that's the key, is how to develop that strong base. This is why many of us, myself, I try my best to research Islamic parenting, right? Especially given the modern day issues we have with technology, social media, all of this. It's very, very essential for us to have this. So this is our first thing. It's about upbringing. Let me give you just another hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Just to stress the importance. And because of lack of time, I'll just give you the English. So the Prophet says, you need to acquaint and familiarize your children with religious teachings and our hadith before those who are not of our faith get to them first. And this is exactly what happens. I've heard many parents who say, well, la ikraha fi din, I can't force my child to do anything. You know, we have to be very liberal and free about everything. If they want to observe hijab, that's their choice. If they want to pray, that's their choice. If they want to come to madrasa, that's their choice. Very, very free about everything. And what happens is that other people, they'll teach your children before you do. This hands-off approach, there are times and places where it is valid. Again, I'm not going into details because my topic is not Islamic parenting. It's just alluding to the point. But there are places where you have to actually jump in and you have to lay down the line. Now, where do you lay down the line? Again, the Ahlul-bayt have given us these boundaries. But to know that is very, very important. There's a lot of other points that we can go through, but again, just for lack of time, I'll skip that. So the first reason that we might lose our identity is because of upbringing. Our parents in our household might tell us to become a Muslim and give us the bare minimum of Islam, but the upbringing is not a religious Islamic upbringing. Especially when it happens that our youth, they have questions about things in Islam. And we don't have the ability to answer it, so what do? Stop asking questions. Just have faith. Don't go against our traditions. You know, this is what our community believes, you have to believe it. This is what our forefathers did, you have to do the same. Doesn't that remind you of the same thing that they said to the Prophet? Our forefathers were doing this, so you have to do the same thing. Why are we continuing the same trend as the kuffar did? We have to be careful of this. The second thing, the second factor which can take somebody's identity away, take them away from a Muslim identity, are their friends. So obviously, let's just say there's a decent Islamic upbringing. Not the best, but it's a decent one. Then the friends they associate themselves with. And again, because of lack of time, I'm going to skip the hadith. You've probably heard them all yourselves anyway. The people you associate yourself with are going to have an effect. So even if you have a decent relationship with your parents, if you go out, who are these kids spending most of their time with? Not with you and I. Not with the mom and dad. They're spending time with their friends, right? Which can be okay if the friends, according to the hadith, if their friends are reminding them about God, if they're helping them keep their identity intact. But if it's the types of friends which don't really care about God, they don't care about prayer, they don't care about the masjid, they don't care about the community, and especially if they're influential friends, then they're going to have an influence on your child, definitely. Peer pressure has a very, very strong influence, right? Not just in this country, everywhere. So that's our second factor. Third would be community. Okay, let's just say parenting is good. They have a decent group of friends. How does the community treat the individuals here? Right? How does the community deal with questions? How do they deal with fitnas? How do they deal with controversies? All of these things. Now again, I was here for 2 years, right? From 2010 to 2012, so I have some understanding. I don't know what's happened over the years. Other communities I've been to, I've seen a general trend. And that usually a certain age or a certain generation has one style of thinking, and they try to impart and force this down the throats of the other generations. And it's not the way that they can understand Islam. And this can be very problematic. And I mentioned this the first night. We know that we have cultural Muslims here. We know we have people who don't pray, they don't observe hijab, they don't fast, whatever. They only come here maybe for food. Fine, at least they're coming here. Why are judgmental individuals in the community driving other people away? Was this ever the way of the Ahlul-bayt? At every moment they tried to bring everybody in. They said, okay, at the very least you're showing up to the masjid, whatever, one day out of the year, fine, that's one day out of the year that your fitrah is calling you back. Okay, let's see how we can get you back every other day of the year. Why are we taking it the negative way and saying, well, where are you the other 364 days of the year? Well, think about it in positive terms, not negative terms. This is the same way the Ahlul-bayt have tried to teach us. Our communities need to be conducive to creating a stronger Muslim identity for us. The last one, which I'll mention, and I won't go into details, is schooling. And this is a big, big issue here. Because some people now have this big debate. You know, do we send them to public schools where they're going to get a lot of misinformation, which now more and more, because there's kids here, I can't go into details, but you know what children are learning in schools at an earlier and earlier age, the type of education they're getting, which for many of us we would find inappropriate. They're learning about things which are clearly in contradiction to what we believe as Muslims. And if we don't provide them with the answers outside and we're sending them to public school, obviously they're going to trust their teacher, won't they? especially if we don't give them the answers. Then some will say, okay, should we homeschool? Should we make an Islamic school? These are discussions that we have to have, but obviously now is not the time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I just wanted to give a general overview about this idea of identity crisis and identity loss. Just to conclude, wrap up, and then we'll move to questions. So our identity that we want to have, it should be this idea that I claim to be a Muslim, I want to be a Muslim, I want to be a person who believes in God, who believes in the prophets, who believes in the imams, who believes in the teachings of the Ahlul-bayt, who believes in the Day of Judgment. Okay, should my actions, speak to that? Should I manifest that same thing? Should my actions be in line with that? They should. Why don't they? It's because there's something wrong with our identity. We've lost our Islam somewhere along the way. We mentioned a few of those factors. We said everybody was born a Muslim. Every single individual that's created is born a Muslim, but through upbringing, through parents, through community, and through schooling, they start losing these pieces of Islam. They lose pieces of their fitrah that's been cleaned by Allah. They lose it piece by piece, and we start losing individuals. We have to be careful. If we're trying to solve this issue, we have to take a proactive approach. And again, not be judgmental. And I want to stress this point. I'm saying it every night because I think it's very important. Because this judgmental attitude, if you take a look at the polls, is one of the main reasons that both Muslims who are born into Islam and those who revert or convert into Islam, this is one of the reasons that they've run away. Because people force this very harsh kind of Daeshi, ISIS-type Islam on individuals. And this was never the way of the Prophet and the Ahlul-bayt. Right? Yes, we know that even right now at the center, I know that there's people sitting outside who are not listening. That's fine. I don't blame them. Why? Because for years, that time when they could have had a connection to Islam, it wasn't given to them. So now, why do we expect something different? Right? It's up to us to go out and see, okay, what do you, person outside, what do you need to come back inside? What can I do for you? This is the seerah of our prophets, our imams, and our ulama. And it's something that we have to advise ourselves and try to brainstorm and figure out how can we implement that in our community. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So we'll go through some questions now. I have a few left over from last night. So I'll go through those quickly first, and then if there's any if we have time, we can go the ones today. First one was, does it make sense to fast but not pray? So I don't know what this person means by does it make sense. Now, are there people here who don't practice everything? Yeah, I can say I have issues in my Islam too. We all are striving, we're all trying to practice. If there's somebody who's fasting, but they're not praying, okay, at least they have something. Maybe they need to strive, they need to do better. Now, how are they going to do that? That's up to that individual and their friends and family members who have to encourage them to do better. I mean, that's, again, a deep discussion that we can't really answer in a 1 or 2 minute Q&A. But yes, it does make sense. There's many reasons why people are leaving. And I gave one reason today about identity loss. There's many reasons why people aren't practicing certain things. Another reason, I'll just mention quickly, is some people might not think it's logical. Right? Some of the issues in Islam, they might not think are rational or logical. Think about issues related to women in Islam. It's a big issue right now. Right? They say that there's gender inequality. So all those issues related to women or gender inequality, they say, well, I'm not going to practice that because it's not rational or logical. So does that make sense? Well, it makes sense for a person to not do something if they think it's irrational. That makes sense, doesn't it? So again, we have to think in their perspective. If I believe that praying is irrational, for example, if I believe that hijab is irrational, keeping a beard is irrational, then obviously, yeah, that makes sense that you wouldn't do it. Our job is to show that no, it is rational, it is logical, and we have to take the effort and provide that proof. Next question is, what is the real meaning of imsak, and why do we have it on the calendar? You guys are really trying to get me in trouble, I think. So, as I said yesterday, imsak is a word that means refrain or restraining or abstaining. It's used in different books of our fiqh, but in terms of fasting, there's no such thing as imsak timing. It's on calendars, I know that. It's on almost every center's calendar. I can't go into the history of how it got to us. It's there. Some say it's because of other schools of thought in Islam which may have had that and it's crept into us. It doesn't really matter. We've asked our marajih, they say there is no such thing as imsak time. Fasting is from Fajr till Maghrib. That's it. Again, I want to reiterate the point. I'm not saying wait till 1 second before Fajr to stop eating. That's obviously not a practical, it's not a good idea. Right? You should brush your teeth, clean up. If you can do ibadat and things like that, do that. Right? So the imsak time that's on there, think of it as your, whatever, for football guys there, think of it as like your 2-minute warning or something. I don't know, right? I think it's a good idea. Keep it as a good alarm, right? Okay. Why do we fast for a month and not 15 days or 45 days? Because God said so. All right, next question. I mean, it's the month of Ramadan. The month in Islam is either 29 or 30 days. If you're looking for the kind of spiritual, philosophical reasoning, then we'd have to go into a discussion about what is the spiritual idea behind time and a month. Why are things have been separated into 12 months? And why is the week separated like this? And that won't just take one lecture. That'll probably take a month's worth of classes probably, right? So I obviously can't answer that. If you really want to know, we can discuss that privately. The next one is, what is Taraweeh? So I'd prefer that the questions, especially the ones that are right after the program, be related to the topic. So I can answer this either privately after the program, or if the MC wants, we can set up a separate, just general, random Q&A. And these kind of questions we can answer as well. What if you accidentally eat or drink during fasting? Well, if you accidentally do it, we know the fatwa is, it's okay. Right? If it's an accident, no problem, right? Just don't make your accidents happen very, very often, right? Like, oh, oops, oh no. Okay. Accidentally eating or drinking does not make your fast batil. It doesn't break your fast. What are some practical ways to gain spiritual enlightenment during this holy month? I alluded to this question last night. I'll reiterate again. There's no one key dua or ziyarah or anything like that. You have to use this idea of self-awareness and self-control to figure out, well, let me give a better answer actually. Are there things that you're doing right now which are haram? This is the best answer you can probably give because it's an answer from the Prophet. It says, what's the best ibadat you can do? Imam Ali actually asked the Prophet. He said the best ibadat you can do in the month of Ramadan is to stay away from what's haram. If there's things on your list that you still have some haram stuff there, your best thing in the month of Ramadan, you know, if you can get to Quran, fine. If you can get to du'as, fine. If you can sponsor, that's all good. The Prophet is saying the most important thing in this month is to stop doing things which are haram. So my suggestion, based on what the Prophet and the Ahlul-bayt say, is try to work on getting rid of at least one haram thing that you still have as a habit. Why, when you don't eat for a long time, then eat, you gain weight? We're basically doing this in Ramadan. Why? So I mentioned it last night. It's because our brain has tricked us into thinking we have to eat a certain amount of food. And I gave the tips for why that's the case. So the reason people gain weight in Ramadan, you know, they're fasting for 29, 30 days, it's because when you show up to the, you know, at the iftar buffet, you treat it like it's a buffet. And you know how Muslims are with free things. We go nuts. That's the problem, right? So I know it's free, and I know it's good, but you got to calm down, right? You got to cut your portions down a little bit. Now trust me when I'm saying this. I gave you the evidence yesterday. If you cut your portion size down, both for sahri, for suhoor, and both for your iftar, you cut it down, you use these psychological, mental, physiological tricks I gave you, that nutritionists have given, your appetite will start changing, your body will start changing, and you won't get that Ramadan gut, right? That's not my promise, these are nutritionist points. Okay, so that's it from last night. For parents with young kids, what advice can you give us to prevent our kids from getting into an identity crisis? Parenting in Islam requires its own workshop or class, but I think one of perhaps the most important points is humility from the side of the parents. Listen, let me be honest with the parents right now. I need you guys to be honest with yourselves. You've been raised with an Islamic identity, right? You've been raised, let's say if you come from overseas, you've been raised in madrasas and things like that. You have a certain level of knowledge, probably more than most individuals regarding God, the Ahlul-bayt, history, fiqh masail, all these things. But just trust me on this. There's a possibility you might be making some mistakes in what you're doing, right? There's a reason that we keep reminding people almost every time that here, we're going to remind you about your fiqh masail. Why? Because we hear it hundreds of times and we still forget. Right? I know especially in this community, fiqh masail get, you know, reminded constantly, right? But I mean, I've been in your prayers for a couple of days. I've seen people making mistakes. And I know that you've been in madrasas learning these rules years after year after year. In the center, they probably have sessions where they're discussing fiqh masail. Maybe you've even asked different scholars about the issue, but we forget, right? This is what happens, and we make mistakes. As a parent, you have to be humble and say, I might not know everything about Islam. I might be getting things wrong. If my child is going to ask me something, I should really be sure. Maybe I can say something called I don't know. Those are not dangerous words. Those are very, very strong and powerful words. If your kid asks you, hey, do we believe in evolution, Daddy? Mom, is evolution in Islam true? Like, how does that work? Don't just be like, no, that's shirk, that's kufr, get out of here. Don't ask these questions. Say, if you don't know, say, I don't know. I got an idea, why don't we research together? This is a great way for you to build your relationship with your children. You show them that, I'm ready to learn, and if you're ready to learn, we can do this together. And inshallah, that could help. That's one thing, just humility. I think maybe, just one more. Kids may not identify themselves as Muslims because they feel Islam is too strict, not fun, always sad. How do you address this with them? And I think I mentioned this with this idea of community. If our community is going to be a depressed, sad community where our salawat make us sound like we're a bunch of zombies or robots, then if we don't create that kind of energy and liveliness in our community, then the kids are going to see that, aren't they? There's programs that, again, as a community, you brainstorm. How can you actually get kids interested? Now, if you say too strict, well, that's, again, it's a deeper discussion. But you have to be able to figure out, how can I explain Islam so that they understand that, listen, sometimes being strict is okay, right? And there's ways to do that. Again, I can't go into too many details. I think that'll be enough for today. One point before we leave. So, a lot of the questions that are being asked by individuals are related to the idea of the common misconceptions and issues that we have in the West, right? About issues regarding, proving that God exists rationally, evolution, Big Bang Theory, or talking about this problem of good and evil. We see all this evil in the world. How do we know that God is good? How can that be the case? Atheists now are very, very strong in their da'wah, right? Much stronger than we are. All these YouTube channels, you have all these social media accounts. It's cool to not be religious. It's a big problem in this society. We're fighting an uphill battle here. So all these misconceptions, this is a continuation, like answering these questions is a way that we can continue our discussion. This is one way we can move forward in our discussions in the next coming nights. Or we can continue with these discussions about fasting, taqwa, self-improvement, self-control, etc. So I'm going to give you guys the choice. I can go either way. I can present and prepare for either one of these things. So they will be putting up a poll with that same Slido program, right, on the same website, slido.com, the same way where you guys were submitting your questions. So there should be a poll that was put up there. Yeah, there it is, right? So I'd leave it up to you, yeah? So either the topics that are, 100%, great. So whatever, you can read it for yourselves, I don't need to say that. So you guys decide. I think it'll be open for, I don't know how long. Till tomorrow morning, right? Give me some time to prep, obviously, right? So please log on, vote. You're not going to get this kind of democracy anywhere else. So vote, right? Give me an idea of what you'd like, right? This should be a two-way relationship. I can't read your minds, obviously. I get your feedback once in a while, but I can't read your minds. Let me know what you think would be very beneficial for this community specifically, based on your own understanding of your youth. And I think even elders, you guys know yourselves. Sometimes those lingering doubts are in your mind too, and that's okay, right? We can answer these questions. So that will be for, we'll determine what happens starting from tomorrow night. And in addition, and I believe it was sent out in the flyer and the circulars, emails, etc. For those who are interested, there's all these discussions and debates that happen in our communities, right? There's political discussions and debates. There's issues about how to run things in our communities. There's issues about, okay, how should we do azadari? There's issues about, what kind of food we serve or how much we do. People are arguing and debating in our communities, right, constantly. And sometimes they get into fights, unfortunately. Saturday night, we'll be having a workshop after the program, which we've entitled Critical Thinking in Islam. If you've ever wanted to learn how is it that you can actually have a proper Islamic discussion with somebody, how can you actually prove your point correct and have it be Islamic, we'll be discussing those. How do you deal with fitnas and controversies and all these issues that you face? How do you actually deal with all these major issues that we're dealing with in this society? Especially these political issues, especially issues dealing with the Jama'at. Because right now, it's either your own opinion or it's God's opinion. They might not always be the same thing. And we need to learn these critical thinking skills to see how we can actually come to a correct or a more correct choice. So those who are interested, I would encourage after the session Saturday night, after the majlis Saturday night, that they attend that session. وآخر دعوان أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.